everyone, and welcome back to Shonen Archive. What's Shonen Archive? Well, Shonen Archive is a series in which me and Zenrod plan to watch every single Shonen Jump series in existence, starting with our main series being Gintama, and then doing a whole bunch of other ones like Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, JJK, which I remember I have to go back to now that it's airing the new season, Chainsaw Man, and various other ones. And we plan to watch every single Shonen Jump series in existence until either one of us dies, or the universe itself implodes, or something else happens that makes it, like, I don't know, maybe an electrical storm takes out all internet, in which case me and Zenrot will lose contact with each other. But those are the extremes in which it will take for us to stop the show. Now, currently, Zenrot is in a very rough spot. So for the time being, it's me going solo, which is me going through Gintama, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I watched 6 episodes. It's taken me a bit to get back. It did not take me the full week, and I hope that you forgive me for doing so. But I was able to watch episodes 294 to 295, which is the Afro arc, episodes 296 to 297, which is the failed illness arc. And then there was another thing that kind of threw me off guard because Crunchyroll had it, which I'm sure some people probably would have liked me not to see. And if I can probably do this with Zen, I will tell him to skip this one. But the Jump Special Anime Festa 2015, and then episodes 298 and 299. The Anime Festa one was before episode 298. So we're going to be going over all of that, and hopefully it won't take that much longer than an hour, because a lot of these are comedy ones, and it shouldn't be that hard to explain a lot of comedy ones, but I have my notes here, and we're going to get through it. And then we're going to talk about what comes after, because you'll notice that I stopped right before what is next to be coming, which is the Shogun assassination arc. This thing, I have to bring it up now because it's going to haunt the narrative at some point, and it will be kind of be mentioned for the ender bits of these episodes. But yes, by the next time you hear Shonen Archive, I will be watching that, and a little bit later on, I'll explain what I think I'm going to end up trying to do. But yeah, let's begin. Starting with the Afro arc, which is episode 294, Afros of Life and Death. So, a new recruit easily defeats about like 30 other potential Shinsengumi members and impresses a whole bunch of people, including Kondo and Hijikata. The vice commander then gives a man, he says his name is Hashiro Afro, but it's actually Katsura, because when they say his name is Hashiro Afro, he comes out and says it's not Afro, Katsura, and it nearly exposes himself as being Katsura, the main enemy of the Shinsengumi, except for apparently Katsura means wig, so they think he's talking about his Afro wig. And so he gets away with it, even though he loudly declares that it's Katsura, and everyone's able to be like, okay, he hides himself. So he ends up fighting the mysterious, they think he's going to fight, I think, Okita or one of the other captains, but then another captain kind of shows up, and Katsura tells him that this is the most terrifying member of all of the Shinsengumi, because he ends up fighting him, and at the end of it, he ends up being told that he's going to be joining the 3rd squad. There are 3 squads of the Shinsengumi. There's the 1st and there's the 2nd. And then we have the captain of the Shinsengumi, which is Saito Shimura. So he is the 3rd captain. And if you can defeat him in a battle, then you'll join him. That's what it was. And so then it cuts to the next day where Katsura is now talking to Yorizoya in their living room, and he's telling him that he has a plan to infiltrate the Shinsengumi, and they all make fun of him, saying that it's a bad idea, and then he also reveals that it was a fight between them. And Katsura has now become the vice captain under Saito. And from what he's learned about Saito is that he barely talks. He kind of like sleeps around a whole bunch, and he goes to the bathroom a whole bunch. And he says he's the only member of like a silent unit. And they say the reason that they joined him, at least this is his theory, is that his entire job is to root out potential Shinsengumi traitors. So he thinks that he's currently being judged by him, and he's kept a list of like a bunch of ex-members, and he's slowly written in his book that he's going to be next, and he's likely going to be the next to be killed. And they say, I think you're probably on thin ice, Katsura, and you should probably look to go away. And he's like, there's no way he suspects me. And then Saito shows up at the apartment ringing the doorbell, and they think that he's caught on. Gintoki tells Katsura to hide, and then Saito bursts out the window, and he starts searching through the apartment without saying anything. They try and tell Saito, why do you just leave at this point? But then Saito goes and uses the back room, and then he leaves. But as he's leaving, he also leaves behind a job request. Katsura by this point has also left the apartment. The letter kind of reveals that Saito was actually, he's like, they keep thinking that he's like some crazy killer who never wants to speak anything. But it actually turns out that Saito is crippling shy, and he's also extremely nervous, and he also always gets stomach cramps due to that. So his silent nature is actually not... it's an accidental thing. And it's also perfect for investigations. But it also means that he's kind of forced himself to start writing in diaries for speaking. And all the lists of the people that he made, those were him making a list of potential friends. And then they learned that they like looked too into the list, and they started to flee in fear. And because anyone who leaves the Shinsengumi has to be killed, then Saito had to then go up and kill them himself. So he kind of accepted that he was going to be silent forever and was never going to have a friend until Katsura showed up. And Katsura has been the only person who has ever tried to reach out to him in some kind of way. So he asked the Yorizoya crew for the courage to help talk to him. And because he left a whole fuck ton of money, Gintoki says, we're going to help this man. So Gintoki sends him a letter and gives him pointers about how he can kind of like do better in conversation. He gives him the idea that you should smile more. And so he tries that. Katsura at this time, though, it's poisoning tea, and he's going to give it to him. And when he's smiling at him, he gives him like a creepy smile that Katsura mistakes as him saying like, oh my God, I'm up to you. And then he says, and then he ends up destroying it to cause a distraction, and because it's what the letter told him. So he never drinks the poison tea. And then he sends a letter back to him saying that the smile isn't working. I'm scaring more people than when I wasn't smiling. Gintoki returns a letter telling him that he needs to move on to the next part of his plan, which is finding opportunities to kind of get along with Katsura. So he follows his suggestion, and he gets him to the shed, which he takes as he's potentially going to kill me here, but it turns out he's leading him to Elizabeth, who's been tied up, and Katsura thinks that he's caught on to him in some kind of way. He gets angry. You think that he's going to hit him, but no, he starts beating up Elizabeth instead, pretending it's like a punching bag. And then you learn that Saito is actually just tamed Elizabeth, and now they see him as a pet. And basically, he kind of cucks Katsura here, because Katsura then tries to get back to Elizabeth after beating him, not having any of it. And he flees in complete despair. And Gintoki realizes that they can never be friends, and it's just not going to work out between them. And I think you should be, I guess you tried, but there's no way to do it. And he thinks that it should be fine. That means that Katsura's plans to destroy the Shinsengumi are going to fail, because there's just no way between them. And then 1 month later, Katsura is now kind of in charge of the third squad, and he has a whole buttload of Shinsengumi with afros similar to him. And that's how the episode ends. And that's episode 294. It is a 2-episode arc, so I kind of want to give my overall feelings about Saito and stuff like that later, but I did make some notes about some stuff that I like. I really do like the it's not Afro, it's Katsura, and then also learning later that Katsura meant Afro. This does come up in the next episode, and both of those bits are really good. I like it when Katsura is getting ready to, like, to be ready to be a part of the third squad. He shows up at attention, and he just gets ignored the entire day, and he's like standing waiting for like instructions. And then at one point he leaves, Saito leaves to go use the bathroom, and he's still there standing at attention. And then he goes off, and then he goes to bed, and it's like it's over. When Katsura says that they draw, he makes a lot of excuses about losing, which I thought was pretty funny. When he's sleeping, he says Z, 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 which was funny to me. Um, some of the stuff with Saito I think is really good, because if you don't know anything about the real Saito, I go a little bit, I most of my note of this is kind of going into the next one, but from what I know of Saito as a Shinsengumi member, he actually was in real life a very silent person, and he was used kind of as a way to like figure out who the traitors of the Shinsengumi were. But he also was kind of an aloof person, and they could never figure out if he was actually legitimately on their side or not. And especially near the end, when the Shinsengumi was kind of going down, I think Saito was one of the people who was able to survive it. So there's always been kind of baggage with him about him not being fully trustworthy, or whether or not he was a traitor to the Shinsengumi himself or something like that, which I thought was this way of showing him here was a very good way of like staying true to the character while also kind of making him his own, by making him giving him these other quirks, but still kind of paying a kind of respect to the original Shinsengumi member and how he has typically been portrayed. Because I can say in other games, like the two I always go back to, which is Fate Grand Order and the Like a Dragon game that's also set in this specific period, they also kind of treat Saito similarly, where in Fate Grand Order he talks about how no one really could tell if he was on his side, and his character is a little bit more aloof, where he does have this kind of aura of someone who wasn't trusted, couldn't be trusted, but at the same time, if you actually talk to him, you would see, like, similar to the Saito in this one, he never really wanted to kill those people, and he always felt really bad about it. Whether or not that's actually true to the real person, I don't know. I wasn't there at the time, but I do think it's neat. And in terms of the Like a Dragon game, the Saito there is actually legitimately a traitor, because the traitor, because that's Ryoma who infiltrates the Shinsengumi as Saito. So not really the real Saito, but if you played that game, it is oddly fitting. All right, so I really like the beginning of this episode. I thought in general that these two arcs were pretty nice, but I'll move on to the next one I can continue talking about this arc in this episode if I just move on to the next episode, which is episode 295, Afro and Wolfro, which, funny enough, the romanized way to say it is Afuro to Afuro, which is an Afro and Wolfro, which is very funny. Very interesting translation on this. Now that I'm trying to learn a little bit more Japanese, I'm paying attention to like how they translate it and stuff like that. Anyway, let's continue on. Continuing from the last episode, Katsura as the Afro character from the previous episode. It has a whole bunch of prisoners in, he's bringing in a whole bunch of prisoners who are also Joy rebels. He's being praised by the Shinsengumi, saying like, man, you're so awesome. And they're also all wearing Afro wigs, including Kondo, Hijikata, and Okita. Like, he's really taken to the Shinsengumi, and he's made it to be able to be co-captain with him. He also says thank you to him, and he swears loyalty to the Shinsengumi, and then he's immediately kicked in the face by Gintoki, who is back in the apartment with, I guess, is it an apartment that they live in? The Yorizoya headquarters. They kind of berate him because he's saying, like, not only are you still doing this, but you're also, like, arresting your fellow terrorists. Like, what are you doing? Your fellow rebels, you're specifically going. And he tells them that he's justifying it by saying it's terrorists who are kind of, like, not really what the Joy rebels are. It's kind of, I guess, the way I saw it, the way I interpreted it as, is that there's Katsura's faction, and then there's the ones who it's a little bit more similar to Takatsuji's faction, who they're a little bit more reckless in terms of who they're hurting, where Katsura's is maybe not 100% like that. So he's maybe dealing with them, or they actually are dealing with terrorists who are just kind of like in it for the fashion, I guess, is a way of saying it. Like, justifying their evil deeds by saying that we believe in this, but that's not actually what they're all about, where Katsura is actually about what he preaches and stuff like that, and he tries not to hurt actual people to get by his ways. So he reveals that he's going to take down Saito, and before he takes down the Shinsengumi, and he's manipulated a whole bunch of events to make it so that the third captain kind of looks like he's suspicious and maybe a spy, and then he uses his influence as the new captain to start spreading rumors and saying that Saito has been neglecting his duties. He doesn't do anything. All he does is like poop, and which he does do a whole bunch of it. And since he doesn't talk, he doesn't defend himself. So he ends up in prison. He's going to face trial the next day. And Gintoki writes to him and says that you need to speak up to yourself to prove that you're innocent. And there's actually a really nice scene here where he's like telling him, basically, Katsura, I'm not going to let Katsura just like kill an innocent man. Because he hasn't done anything to Katsura. Katsura thinks that this is like some kind of evil guy who's been killing a whole bunch of people who's ruthless. He's not. He's just a guy who wants a friend. And there's actually a really like a scene that I thought was very cute. Ooh, not cute. No, what's the right word? Very touching. There you go. Where it looks like he's crying at the news of it, and Gintoki's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry they had to hear it this way," only to reveal that he was sleeping the entire time. And Gintoki's like, "Whatever, man. You go ahead, get executed. See if I fucking care." Anyway, the next day, the trial is beginning, and to their surprise, when they're like giving him all these like things that he's did, Saito speaks up for himself. And it turns out that Gintoki has put a button-sized speaker onto his clothes. So as to mimic, basically what they're going to do is that they're going to Muppet it. He's like a little Muppet. They speak, and then he just mimes their action. And they'll be able to defend him and do all that. And the Yorizoya are kind of looking off from the opposite ends with a walkie-talkie, and that's how they're going to do it. And Gintoki accidentally answers through the walkie-talkie, and this it makes it seem really weird. So Katsura says, like, look at him, he's shady, you can't trust him. And then Kagura shows up, and she starts speaking in like a broken speech language because she's supposed to be like a foreigner who is more based off of China, so her Japanese wouldn't be perfect, but it ends up being that they force him to say that he's a foreigner, and he starts speaking in broken English because they say, well, now that he's revealed that, he has to keep it. And they reveal that the Shira is actually Katsura. He's the real traitor to the Shinzengumi. And they say that they don't believe it. At first, they think that because they think he's a foreigner, they think that he's calling it a wig. So they're like, oh, I'm a foreigner, silly foreigner. He got the wrong word. He's like, no, you got it all wrong. And so Saito starts to provide proof that what he's been doing, and he starts like investigating. This is where it takes a really weird trip. So he reads the entries, and the first entry, they're all focused in on all the other ones, saying someone has been illegally stealing food, and he catches Hijikata just like fucking chomping on some mayonnaise, and he says, I didn't see anything. So Hijikata says he's innocent. Okita then says, then in his next journal entry, Hijikata says that he's been having some heavy diarrhea, and Saito suspects that someone has been poisoning his mayonnaise that he ate yesterday. So he goes in there and he catches Okita poisoning the mayonnaise, and he says, I didn't see anything. So then Okita says he's innocent. And then this is where it takes a turn for the worse. So Saito then hears a noise from the mess hall. He goes to go check it, and he sees a naked Kondo, and he's cutting into some cognac gels. And then he gives it to the crew to eat the next day, and they like it, and then Kondo cuts him off. Kondo is naked when he's with the cognac gels, and he's putting a very like vagina like hole into the cognac gels. The implication here is that Kondo has either fucked or jacked off into the cognac, and he fed it to the... This is really fucked up, by the way. The more I'm actually saying this and kind of going through it, it did rub me a little bit wrong because it did feel kind of extreme for what he usually does, but I guess they never reveal if it is the same cognac, so maybe you can use... It's better to not think about it too much and go for it, but I still think it's pretty heavily implied that's what happens here. I really hope that me saying that did not like trigger something inside of the YouTube algorithm that says this should not be promoted in any kind of such case. But let's continue on. So he gives them all this to say like, oh, clearly I'm not guilty. But they're now that Katsura uses it, says it like, look, obviously he's blackmailing you to prevent him from revealing the truth that he is an actual traitor. Like he's evil. And then Katsura, so he says that we should still purge him, and Hijikata says, I'm really annoyed with this. Trial by combat, you two fight each other and we'll go. So they start fighting each other, but Saito is still waiting for his line, so he's not really fighting. So he waits for them to give like lines for him to do, and then he starts doing stuff. And then at some point he waits so long that he falls asleep, and Katsura takes it that he's powering up his ultimate move. So then he decides to do the same and sleep, and he sleeps so hard he takes off his wig, and then finally the other Shinsengumi members go, ah yes, Katsura. And so Katsura goes to flee, and he's fleeing. He reveals that Elizabeth has planted a whole bunch of bombs on the complex, and he holds the detonator, and before he presses it, Saito, like with crazy quickness, attacks him. And so it kind of, Gintoki says he doesn't need our help anymore. He's gonna find a way to talk to him. As he tells him to go gather the bombs. He doesn't tell it specifically, but Kondo says that we're gonna gather the bombs, and you're gonna go chase down either Kondo or Hijikata. But either way, they say you go capture him. We'll collect the bombs and figure out how to deal with them. As he's fighting him, he mentally like thanks Yorizoya for helping him come over his shyness, and he realized that he can never really truly talk to them, but there's another way that he can talk, which is through his blades, which is how he was able to talk to, he felt he was able to talk with Katsura in the past. The battle ends, and Saito's too injured to kind of continue chasing Katsura, and Katsura reveals that the detonator was destroyed. And they say it's a tie. And Hijikata says that we've gathered the bombs, we need to disable them. We're not sure which one's the cut though. And Katsura says that all of them but the Z wire have to be cut. He says that he must defeat Z himself, and they'll meet again another day, and he goes and flees the scene. Hijikata then tells Saito that we need to tell you which one is the wire. And I think he gets so overstimulated that he just ends up falling asleep, and he starts saying in his sleep, Z, 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 Z. And Hijikata says, it's Z, cut the Z wire. And then it blows up the building. And as everything burns down, a half-burnt page kind of falls to the ground, and it reveals that Saito still considers Katsura friends, and also the Yorizoya. And that's where this one ends. So yeah, I thought this was a nice little 2-episode arc, outside of the weirdness with Kondo, just because I don't like thinking of him serving it. I think that the part of him fucking it is okay with me. It's the part where he served it later that is sitting in a crawl in my throat. That's the part I don't really appreciate. It feels a little bit too extreme. But other than that, I thought it was really nice. I really do like Saito. It's a very simple little Afro arc, and I thought it was pretty good. If it was not for the following arc that I'm going to talk about now, I would say it's a pretty good, pretty funny one. But the next one, literally, I think is maybe the funniest 2-episode arc that I've had, with the second episode being maybe one of my favorite funny episodes that I've seen. But as far as this one, I really do like the relationship between Katsura and Saito. I thought it was well established. I'm always a big sucker for the idea of becoming friends through clashing blades. It's a very tired, I guess, trope if you think about it, but I really like stuff like that. So people use it for a reason. I did like how much Katsura's plan had been working out. I did like the trial and everything. I did like the fake when they were pretending to be him. When he has to pretend that he's a foreigner and he actually starts saying Japan Ameisha, I thought it was fucking hilarious. But yep, very, very good 2 episodes here. So we'll move on from episode 295, and we'll head over to episode 296, which is Take the Initial Premise Slightly and It Will Cost You, which is the beginning of the Feigned Illness arc. So this begins, it's a very hot day, and Kagura is being extremely annoyed because the other 2 members of Yorizoya are underneath her umbrella, and she tries to tell him that, hey man, I'm a part of the Yato tribe, I can't be out in this heat. And both of them say, whatever man, that was a dumb premise anyway, sometimes we don't even follow it, why should we follow it now on the hottest day ever? So as they're fighting and they're complaining about this, they're looking for a client that is going into the love district. Gintoki and Shinpachi completely forget about everything and kind of just slap Kagura down to the floor, and then go to chase their client. And they're like, all right, we're going to form up a periphery around here and we're going to get this done. And they look to Kagura and they realize that they're holding Kagura's umbrella, and they go, oh crap, we forgot something. And Kagura's face down on the floor. So it cuts to next time they're in the hospital, and the doctor's treating Kagura for a heat stroke. and her fever has not subsided. And they think because they say the hospital has little information about how Yato biography works, that they're not biography, biology. So they're like, we can't give a full accurate diagnosis, and Gintoki and Shinpachi feel extremely like guilty about what they've done and how they got to this point. They go visit her, and she's they try and justify it as like, it's okay, she's probably just happy to be able to rest and eat food. Kagura says that she doesn't even want to eat any food, and when she's talking to him, they briefly talk, and she vomits out a whole bunch of blood. Gintoki and Shinpachi then are left, and it's revealed that it was tomato juice the entire time. And then finally Kagura is able to eat more, and Kagura reveals that she's basically faking it to make them feel very guilty about everything. And she indulges in a whole bunch of things at the hospital and eats a bunch of food and actually ends up getting kind of fat. Gintoki shows up to kind of like still be with her because I think he says that he doesn't even leave the hospital. And Kagura has to hide the fact that she has like a giant belly and all that other stuff, so not to reveal that what the jig is, which is that she's lying. And she says for Gintoki to do a whole bunch of different things, and because of his guilt, he's doing them with insane speed. And then as she's doing it, a bunch of people start to come in to kind of watch her, as to be like, no, she says like there's like a bunch of people bothering her outside, which are Sachan, Kondo, and Hasegawa. Sachan, he beats up. Kondo gets beat up by Otai. And Hasegawa, they don't even bother to help, and he just says, "You're just gonna leave me hanging?" He's hanging from his neck from outside, trying to kill himself. Yeah, but after dealing with all of them, Kagura says like, we'll see how it goes. But then she ends up vomiting, and she has like a giant gut, and then she says she has a hard time breathing, and Kagura ends up being put on life support, and she has to fake being that she's in a coma. And her eyes are super wide open, and everyone's coming, and Atose, Tama, Catherine, they all come to show their condolences, and they're all treating it as if Kagura's about to die, and they're making jokes, not jokes, but they're like talking about the last month's rent, and Gintoki's like at the wall, he's punching the wall, but then also while he's punching the wall, he's also talking about other things. They're talking about the funeral fee. They're already ready for Kagura to die because they think that they can't help her. And then Kyubei, Sachan, and Sukoyo show up to offer their condolences. And again, they start talking about how she's going to die. And then at the end of it, Kagura's like, oh my god, they're going to kill me, basically. They don't think I can survive this. And every time they think that maybe I could survive, she's trying to find like the right time to like do it. And as she's like she's like, come on, you guys got to start believing in me, Okita enters the scene, and that's where the episode ends. So this is a very easy episode to talk about because all it is like one gag in here. I think it's a very good start of the gag. I did like how serious it was, how serious everyone else was taking it, and they were still able to find gags. It is a very good bit because there have been times where people were in the hospital and they treated this way. So the idea of a character having to fake being in there and also trying to be there, I think it's actually a very sitcom like situation to find yourselves in. But when you have the right set of characters for it and you do the right amount of comedy, I think it works out pretty well. And I liked a lot of that in there. So it was kind of a very enjoyable, just kind of laughing at it. And I thought it was a good setup for what is the much better second episode. Oh yeah, one of the reason that Gintoki, so when they're talking about the funeral money, Gintoki punches the wall and says, "I'm going to use it all on pachinko," and then she's like, "You're already planning to do away with my funeral fees. Like, you're so bad even with all this." And I did like that she's the whole premise of this is like, you mocked my character. Like, the one thing that my character has, how dare you? I'm going to make you feel as bad about this. And now we'll go to the payoff of all this, which is episode 297, which is Keep Your Farewell Short. So back at the hospital, they reveal that the princess is there, Princess Soyo, and she's Kagura's best friends. And he said he says, "We're sorry, we tried to hide it from her, but it's no good." And Princess Soyo is completely beside herself. She's like, "I can't believe Kagura can't die." And before Kagura thinks that this would be a great time for her to wake up, but before she does, Okita hits her in the face with like his leg and says it's gonna be okay. He renders her unconscious. And he says, "Don't worry, I'll plan out the funeral service." And she wakes up in a funeral home inside of a coffin. It's being carried down the aisle, and she realizes that Okita has found out that she's been faking it, and she says, "No, this is bad. This is the only person that I didn't want to know that I've been faking it." So Okita sets up a coffin that will be impossible for her to break out of, because he turns it into a tanning booth with lights inside, with the justification saying, finally, in your death, you can enjoy a tanning booth that you could not in real life. And Okita says, we need to place flowers and everyone say goodbye. And because the princess is there, she treats it like this huge gala event. And then he reveals that he's basically, there's too many people, so they have to put it on the fucking device. So they put her on a sushi tray, a conveyor belt that will take her directly into the furnace that will burn her ashes, and people will have the bit here to say goodbye in like a sushi style and leave their flower. Originally they were going to leave the flower one by one, and he's the first person to do it. And he makes a speech to make her feel as bad as possible and to reveal that she's basically going to die, and that he's laughing. Like, people think that when he's up there, like, he's like, his shoulders are like going back and forth, and Kondo's like even going like, man, I didn't know he would take it so hard. They always fought for each other, but you know, they fought against each other, and I thought they hated each other. But it looks like that's the kind of person that really likes you at the end of the day. And then they cut to the front of Okita. He's fucking dying laughing. He can't believe how stupid she was, and she allowed this to happen. So then they speed things up. They start the go from the coffin to the crematory. It passes by a whole bunch of grievers who try to leave their flowers to her to say goodbye, but it's also going kind of fast. And at one point, they try and leave their Catherine and Atose. I think Atose isn't able to give the full thing, and then Catherine says like, look at you weren't even able to say everything that you were going to say, and then she misses her bit. And then they try and place the flowers, and they place it directly into her eyeballs, and they tell Tama, you need to fix the flowers for us. No, it was like, we didn't put it in the right place. So then Tama goes to fix it, and then she stabs it directly into Kagura's eyes, and she tells him, Kyubey, you need to fix the flowers. And they try, and it lodges it deeply into their nose. So then she said, they tell him, Tsukuyo, you need to fix it, please. And she tries to pull him out the end, and then all it does is put Kagura's head out of the coffin. And then Sachan gives her a chance, and she ends up throwing a giant. She tries to get her to sit back into the coffin by putting a large ass stone into it. And at this point, Kondo and Hijikata notice that the coffin is coming their way, and there's a big fucking boulder on top of it. So they think that it's a part of a ritual, and they say, God damn it, we didn't know that this was a ritual. We need to find a boulder to throw it at her. So they find a big fucking boulder, and they're gonna put the boulder on top of the coffin. And Otai sees them, and they see that they missed her bit because it's going too fast, and the boulder is huge. So she's touched by this moment, and she helps them carry it. As they're going through the slope, they fell a slope on the crematory, which the boulder then rolls down, and it's caught by Katsura and Elizabeth, who have joined in on the grieving. And Hijikata says, I don't see whoever's below there. And Katsura says, I don't see who's ever above there. They have squashed the beef specifically to put a boulder on top of Kagura's grave. And so they go to put the boulder on top. I should mention, during this entire time that they are doing this shit with the boulder, they have a live Kagura coffin reaction at the bottom of the screen and a meter on top to tell you how far away they are from putting this boulder on top of her and basically killing her for real. And as they're doing this, all the grievers have joined forces and are singing a song for her as they go to put the boulder on top of them. And they're like fully singing in like an enka song of some kind. And then Hasegawa shows up to slow the coffin down and says, kill me and her at the same time with the boulder. It's okay, we could do it together. And the crowd finally gets together to throw the boulder and kill her. And it's stopped at the last second by Gintoki and Shinpachi to return her umbrella and say goodbye. um and he basically realizes how much he ended up caring about her, and as Kagura kind of realizes it, she kind of says I'm sorry out loud, and the crowd says, hey, did someone say that? And then Gintoki and Shinpachi start to realize, like, no. They put her back in the coffin to basically say, like, okay, she's ready to go into the crematory, because they realize that they're completely fucked, that Kagura has been faking it since this entire time. And if they get caught, they get caught in it, even though they didn't know what was happening. They realize what's happening. Everyone's angry. They tie him up, and the last we see is them going off to the crematory. And that is the end of episode 297. And this is... I had to watch this multiple times. When that song started playing and everyone was joined together, ready to put the boulder on top of her and kill her, it is maybe one of my favorite. Not since Gintoki's reveal that his penis was replaced with a Phillips head screwdriver, and the end of that arc was him triumphantly returning to put his dick in a socket, have I laughed at a moment as much as this one. This might be my favorite moment of all of them. It was so unbelievably funny. This might be the best 2-episode arc, where the second episode hard carries the other time. I'm a big fan of Scary Movie 3, and specifically because there's one scene where they're doing coffin humor, and it lasts maybe like 2 minutes, but I die laughing every time I think about that scene and watching it. When I watched that scene with my family, I could not stop laughing because it was so fucking funny to me. So this entire episode feels like it was tailor-made for me. I don't know if for other people, maybe there's funnier episodes out there, but for me, this literally hits on every single fucking cylinder. Every single character moment, every interaction, the live Kagura reaction as the boulder comes closer and closer to her grave, and she comes closer and closer to death. And I know it's not supposed to be like the meme of live whatever reaction. That's how they do it on Japanese TV, I believe, whenever someone is reacting to seeing something go on. Either way, very funny to me. The moments where the Shinsengumi team up with Katsura, also really good, because they're having like a real moment of like joining together to celebrate Kagura. And at the end, I did like when he came back to return the umbrella. And I also think that Kagura, what she's doing is a very kid thing to do. So I'm not like, I don't see a reason to get like angry at her, because she's doing a very dumb little kid thing to do, but she's a dumb little kid. And when she realizes she messed up, she does say I'm sorry, and she probably realizes how much people cared for her and stuff like that. And this is another episode where I realize Okita does not get punished for what is basically going to be attempted murder, but it's okay because she did fake being dead and made a lot of people worry. Of course, at the end, when everything turns out okay, I guess he figures it out. Another good thing to mention here is that I really like that when they do the funeral, it actually says in a big banner, Princess Soyo's friend's funeral. So they're all celebrating it because they know that it's very important to the princess. There's even like a whole big hall with like her face out in the front. That's super funny. And apparently, I didn't know this, but this is a trivia that I've seen here. The Japanese word for nose and the Japanese word for flower, which is hana, are pronounced the same. So it would be hana. So when they told Kyubei to put the flower, to deal with the flowers, they misinterpreted it as put the flowers on Kagura's nose or something like that. All right, so that's that episode. There's not much else for me to say other than this was a very funny episode, one of the greatest. Loved it. And now we're gonna go on to the later bits of some episodes and talk about it there. This one in particular it had to deal with the fact that it was like one of my favorites, funniest episodes, and this one tries its best. So we'll move on to episode 298, which has a part A and part B. Part A is called One Editor is Enough. We go back to the prison, and Shachi, the guy who was like making manga in prison, he gets a visit from a nurse called Norutaki, and he needs like help because he had like problems with his bowels, but he's actually using it as a a way to work on his manga in like a comfortable place. As he wakes up, the nurse really likes his manga and she says she likes it. He ends up falling for her, and then he talks to his editor, which is Gintoki, the next day, and his manga has kind of transformed into a romance comedy, and also he's drawing her everywhere. And Gintoki says, "This sucks. This is stale." And they all, as he explains to him the situation, he goes like, "That explains why all the female characters now wear glasses." And they look kind of like her, and so they say that Shanchi is too, I think, nervous to try and confess to her, and so they decide to confess to her through the manga itself. They do this like 2, 3, 4 more times, and then at the end of it, as the story inside the story gets more and more complicated, it's like it turns into Dragon Ball at some point, because the character that was based off of her ends up dying and ends up being very dramatic, and she just rejects him in the end, and that's the end of part A. There's not much to it, just because it was one really long bit, but I thought the bit was just kind of, it was all right. It was fine. After the previous long bit, this one didn't hit me as hard as the other ones, but I thought it was still perfectly fine. And then, wait a minute. Let me check on something real quick, because I think there's another factor in play here for why I feel, if I'm remembering things correctly. Hold up. Give me a sec. So I think if I remember right, okay, before, as the Kagura episode was ending, they revealed a trailer for the upcoming Shogun assassination arc, which is this winter, and it kind of left the last 2 episodes that I had to watch after watching that trailer, kind of left me in a little bit of a state of, I don't know if I'm in the mood for comedy. I kind of just want to watch that, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So yeah, the only thing I have here as far as notes, because this is where I was like, I only have like a single note here, like 2 notes. I thought it was very cute the way that she kept showing up in her manga, and I said that when you're really focused in on a girl, I felt like that felt like something like I would kind of do, not to go to the extent he would, but I think typically what I did, because I don't think I ever drew girls. What I did is I would just start naming them for things and stuff. Until I stopped. Actually, all my female character names, they usually come from 1 or 2 places. Either they come from food, or it's because it was from a girl at one point or another I was kind of crushing on. So either they're like named after very specific girls that sound like real names, or they're named after Taco Bell menu items. There's one of the two. Find out what kind of girl you are by asking me later if you're a Taco Bell food menu item or your other. For me, it's one and the same. Anyway, and then we get to part B, which part B I didn't write a single note on, so I'm just going to very quickly explain it. It's still another manga focused one, except for now they're trying to get their manga finished in time for the upcoming Jump thing, and it's like a 19-page manuscript. Oh, the name of this episode is The G Pen is Caprarious and the Maru Pen is Stubborn. So Gintoki gets like infiltrates the compound, and he gets 3 skilled assistants, but they're all like weird perverts that are really into panties and have all committed panty related crimes. Shachi is like in distress because he said, "I thought you were gonna get professionals and you just got this guy." All of them try and do like weird panty related humor, and then they all go off on the side. It's like, you know what, we're just gonna like not trace, it was fill in the lines to do the inking process. And Gintoki fucks up, and he's the final page, and he messes up the girl's face, and trying to not tell Shachi about it, he tries to get the others to help him. And then they always just say, "How did your hat look like?" Because I messed up the hat. And he said like, "Well, it kind of looked like this." And all the hats that they show are just like various different kind of panties. And Shachi ends up falling asleep, and then he sees a note from Gintoki saying the manuscript is done, and he goes to show him. And he says, "The only problem I had with it is that for some reason the heroine's face was covered up in the last 4 pages, which is the hat is overcoming her face or something like that." And that is the end of episode 298. That's something how I felt. Other than the little cute moment at the beginning, I it's not like I dislike the Shachi character or anything like that. I just wasn't feeling it. I think from based off the previous one, so it's kind of it feels to me a little unfair to like say specifically like what was wrong with it. Other than like there's a lot of panty jokes. It just really was a case of like I saw the trailer for Samurai Assassination Arc, and I did not really want to deal with this at the moment. So we will move on and go to what is next on here, which is going to be the Jump Special Anime Festa 2015. So for this one, I'll just say that it's just like a big screen shows up and they talk about like, hey, Gintama's been around for 10 years and they kind of like get a big cake to celebrate, and I think Hasegawa starts eating the cake and he says the cake tastes better than dog food. And then later on, when they show him later, he's like kind of eating dog food. That's really the only thing. It's like a little intro bit here. And then they introduce the thing that they came to show Jump Festa was the trailer for the Shogun Assassination Arc. It only was like 12 minutes long. It's clearly here just to be like, hey, check out for Jump Festa. I thought the little intro bit was pretty nice, but the longer trailer bit of the actual thing, I skipped over because I didn't want to know what was happening into it until I saw it. Because like I said, if I just started watching it, I was going to be like, I don't really want to see anything more from here. So I like the bit about Hasegawa on the cake, and I always like them celebrating. There's also a really long period where it's just like nothing but a black screen. And then finally they go, okay, I guess it's time to celebrate. In the kind of Gintama fashion that you've come accustomed to knowing and stuff like that. So that was the Jump Special Anime Festa. And now we'll move on to episode 299, which is right here. Its name is Strike When the Sword and the Overlord Are Hot, and this is another Part A and Part B one. Part A is thankfully this one I think is a little bit better than the previous one. But they discover a new medal on Tetsuko, and they discover a new rare medal on the alien planet, and Tetsuko is interested in kind of getting some. And so she leaves the shop to Yorizoya to look after for her for a bit. Gintoki's looking at all the swords and she has on display, and then 2-3 customers come into the shop. They look a lot like Dragon Quest characters. And the hero, who's the leader, Lotto 6, requests a sword that needs to be repaired, and the sword was a cursed sword that was held by their former comrade, which is Takeshi, and it can't be unequipped even though he's dead. And Shintoki says, why don't you not use Takeshi's corpse as a weapon while it holds the core sword? And that kind of just makes a lot of six go like, hey man, you got a lot of good ideas. And so he requests another sword, which is that he wishes for the Galactic Holy Sword Cosmos to be reforged. The sword in question, however, is still embedded in a rock. Leaving the sword in, they tell him like, hey, get it out of the sword and we'll be good. They can't unsheath it, so they end up kind of destroying it and they break it in half. And at that moment, the Galactic Overlord, Tiramisu, the main enemy of the hero Lotus 6, arrives with two comrades and they have a sword that is stuck in a can of peaches, and they say that this is going to be able to defeat the hero Lotus 6. And before they leave, he leaves like a vassal of Kiyoshi to help them reforge it. And then Gintoki also breaks the Galactic Overlord sword, and then they kind of end up like trying to reforge it together. They say that, and then while they're kind of like trying to reforge it, they say the hero sword is longer than the Overlord sword, and they both kind of just keep not chomping away, but like hammering away at the length until both of them are the same size by having nothing. So to fix the fact that they basically got rid of the sword, they jam it into Kiyoshi and Takeshi's skulls, and they become the new swords. They both revive, and one becomes the new hero and the other one becomes a new overlord. Obviously the one on Takeshi becomes the new overlord and Kiyoshi becomes like the new kind of hero. They try and solve the heroes again, and they kind of go back to doing the whole sword bit. Tetsuko arrives back and says, I couldn't find any of the new medals. And then they say, like, you need to just tell them the truth about what happened. They do, and then they form a truce together, and they decide to take down Yorizoya together, and that's how the episode ends. Perfectly fine episode. I like Dragon Quest references, and this has a whole bunch of different Dragon Quest references in them. I think the job classes for the Dragon Quest party is a warrior who's who's holding the cursed swords. Bless you to my brother, he just sneezed. There's hero, there's mage, and there's priest. I like the whole switch up. When they do the switch up, they try and say, like, you need to walk like this, which is that when the zombie becomes a part of the hero group, he tells them that they need to start walking like villains do. And when the villain one is on the hero side, they tries to make them walk like Dragon Quest villains, which is always on the front, and then the other one is like in a line formation, which is very good. Again, perfectly fine episode. Enjoyed it. And that's part A. And now we'll move on to part B, which is called Oil Rain. While it's raining, Tama decides to go avoiding the rain and sit next to an old cigarette vending machine, and she kind of talks to it and until the rain stops. And then the next day she visits the store again, and she continues to kind of like learn more about it. She hears that the old lady who the old lady who she talked to before she talked to the vending machine on the previous day, that she's going to be retiring and she'll be leaving. As they are talking to each other, Hijikata shows up and is having trouble with the vending machine, and they both start just hitting it a whole bunch. And then Tama is able to talk to it, and she tells him, like, hey, here, you need to be calm to it. And the cigarette machine spews out a bunch of Hijikata's favorite smokes. And they say that the vending machine was actually just kind of hungover, so they, like, vomited it out. But Hijikata's happy because he has a whole bunch of cigarettes for what is basically free. On the next rainy day, Tama notices that the shop is closed due to personal reasons. And so she starts spending a lot of time with the vending machine, saying that that her umbrella is broken. And to show gratitude for her not abandoning him, the vending machine gives Tama a bunch of cigarettes. Whenever she tries to purchase a single pack, but she's never given the right pack that she needs, which is the one that Atose wants. And so Thomas starts teaching it how to properly give, like, the proper packs and stuff. And eventually what happens is that she's helping him by the side of it. And Atose starts to get a little bit worried because she's afraid that Tama is kind of leaving forever and leaving behind her umbrella in the rain. So she asks Gintoki to go investigate what's Tama been up to. And Gintoki just sees it as, like, two friends hanging out, and he doesn't say you're worrying, but Atose takes it as, like, she got a boyfriend or something. And eventually it gets to the point where the vending machine becomes very sick. And she has Gengai look at it, and he says that there's no way to fix the vending machine. And it becomes basically broken. Like, it can't expend. I don't know if that's the right word. It can't give any more cigarettes away. And because of the old lady has likely, I think, probably passed away at this point, they're ready to demolish the store and would likely also demolish the vending machine. But she takes the vending machine, she, like, carries it to a safe location, and she spends time with it every single day. And as more time goes off, more people are recognizing. They say you need to get rid of this trash. It doesn't really do anything. And finally, down the last day, Tama sees that someone has basically already kind of thrown it away, and she kind of goes there and she kind of, like, laments that why does it need a purpose? Why isn't it enough to just kind of be with them? Why do they need to have a purpose of anything to be able to, like, continue living, basically? And as she's consoling it, Gintoki arrives and says, like, oh, this was an excellent spot to just kind of sit by. And it was like, I didn't need anything else. I just wanted to sit here because it seemed like a very nice place to sit down. And the vending machine, which has been broken down, starts crying again. And Tama kind of, like, lightly reprimands it, and then I think it's implied that the episode ends, but it kind of like implies that it dies, and this is the end of it for it. And I think she says, whether you're selling or crying, do one pack at a time. And it's like a very, very, for what is a vending machine, extremely emotional end bit as we see here. So I think I actually have a decent bit of stuff here. I really like the second half of this episode a whole bunch. I really like a lot of the Thomas Focus characters. I think she might be one of my favorite of the side characters. Whenever she does get used, she's either like really funny, or when they're, I think whenever they use them, they either want to use Tama because Tama is very cute, but they also have a way to be able to explore a lot of humanity stuff through Tama, as Tama is not really a living being. So she's allowed to kind of be a little bit more wax philosophical and try and figure out what does living mean, especially as someone who is an artificial being and is not really alive in the way that me or you would be. They're kind of alive in a very different sense, but is that enough? What is expected to be a lot of what a working android is different from the expectations from a human one. I think it's actually kind of fucked up, the idea of giving sentience to machines, but when you give sentience to machines, you still expect them to function like a machine, which is not fair to do. If you're going to give a kind of like humanity to a machine, you can't do that and then start treating it like it's still not really a person, because at that point what you're doing is like basically creating, I guess without a better word for it, like kind of like I don't know the right words for it. I don't want to use specific words for it, but it is in a kind of way like trapping them into their only real soul of living is being able to perform this one function, and if they can't perform that function, that there's no point to live. And that's what's different between them and a humanity. But I also feel like in some ways I think Thomas probably used a little bit to explore some of the stuff in Japan, where I feel like a lot of Japanese society also kind of value, they have a society in which they believe that everyone should participate, and if they believe that a group effort of working together, they can accomplish their goals, and as long as everyone's contributing to that, it works out perfectly fine. But then what happens when there's someone who's sick, someone who's maybe disabled, they cannot function? Is their right to live any different from yours just simply because they are not contributing to the way that you see society? And I feel like that's kind of what they're going for with this vending machine, and I think it's a very good way of kind of exploring it at the same time. And I feel like if they hit all the right emotional points, at some point you have to probably, it kind of goes various by person by person. I'm someone who's able to kind of very easily get attached to things that are not typically living beings. I'm not like, let me be clear here. I'm not one of those dudes who gets really weird and starts saying, this is my AI girlfriend. I'm not going that far. But if I have like a toy, I really like that toy, and if I liked a pen, I really like that pen because it helps me for a whole bunch. I like my monitor. I've had this monitor on that you can't see right now to the left of me for maybe over 10 years, and most people would likely throw it away at this point because it's planned obsolescence, but I don't really see it that way. I see it as they help me in some kind of way, and I like it and I grow attached to it, and that's the kind of way that I see it. So I think for some people, they don't have that for themselves, and I don't think that hits these specific episodes really hit for them that much, but for me I think it does for a really good bit. And I've talked a whole lot about this. Maybe more than probably that is expected for it, but again, I really do like stuff like this. But anyway, that's end of episode 299. Again, they do another hype up talking about the Shogun assassination arc, which is going to be the next thing that I cover. So now it's the time of the show where I explain what's coming up next on Shonen Archive. Oh joy, oh big joy. And the answer is, what's next is the Shogun assassination arc. Now, how do I actually want to do it? It's going to be a little bit tough. I think with these I think I found a way to kind of like more quickly go over things. I've had two things in my head, and I'm going to go depending on how I kind of feel about it. One way is I do the classic bit of it's a really long episode, I talk a whole bunch about them, and I do it that way. And then the other bit is I'm going to write down my feelings, and it's going to be a more scripted video. I know that's going to be a little bit tough because if it's a scripted video, I probably have to put a lot more effort into it, so that means it will probably be farther away. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick to the old style for the Shogun assassination arc, and then the one that comes after it, which is the farewell Shinsengumi arc. That one I'm going to try that, and then we're going to see where to go from there, because after that we're hitting the end game as far as Gintama is concerned. It's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming up, and I'll have to figure out if I want to stick to the old style. The reason that, if you're wondering why even have this like kind of working of it, I can talk to you guys and say for the reason why. The reason is that as much as I appreciate a lot of people who say that they enjoy hearing just me, I think for these specific videos, I think they're more interesting when I have someone like Zen to kind of talk to. And when I don't have Zen to talk to, I feel I can get easily lost in my train of thought of what I want to explore. And at that point, wouldn't it be easier if I could just write it down and explore it and show you what I feel about it, and maybe do a little bit of a different format? At that point, I could then more easily kind of go through the actual things that go into the episodes and then start talking about it there. But, you know, I'm going to try the way that we typically do it for the Shogun assassination arc, and then from there I'm going to try the other way with the farewell Shinsengumi arc. If you want to hear, if you have any specificness of how you feel about what I'm talking about, which is a more scripted video versus the more kind of free forming loose, I'm here. At one point my mom opened up to come home from work, so I had to pause. I don't know if you noticed when that happened, but if you pay enough attention you'll be able to find out exactly when that happened. The kind of more loosey feel form freeing, that's not how you say it, free flowing podcast like feel to it, then obviously I'm going to try that one for Shogun. But I really do want to try doing at least that one a little bit different. And the big like 3 hour long plus episodes are likely going to happen whenever we can get Zen back on the horn and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my current thoughts about it. Again, feel free to share anything. I'm always up to reading whatever you got to say. And also you can talk about it. So now we talk about how can you show support for Shonen Archive. As always, the main thing that supports the things on my channel are fake Grand Order, and a lot of people like my fake Grand Order stuff, so that means I can easily kind of go off and do Shonen Archive and not have to worry about growth or anything like that. But if you want to have the show grow, then leaving a like, leaving a comment helps out a whole bunch. I guess you could share it with other people who are wanting to be interested in it, but to be honest, a lot of people kind of randomly come into Shonen Archive that it kind of works for that. But if you want to really show how to really do it, then sharing it is for the best. That's the other funny thing. If I actually did want to try and build up to a better degree, I think doing them as videos would likely help a little bit more if I did it a little bit more scripted and there was more to watch other than this PNG of Elizabeth and Katra that you've been watching the entire time with the live reaction coffin here. As the words, "These immortal enemies have joined forces to try to kill me," is here for them. But yeah, that's how you can show more support for the show. And now finally, we get to the ending bit of the show. Now, usually how I typically ended it is I tell Zen to say goodbye, and then a gunshot rings off and I shoot him down. But Zen's not here. But I still want to keep that in the show, so now what I do is I take whoever leaves a comment into one of these Shonen Archive either episodes or one of the far back ones, whatever. Whenever they leave a comment, I look at them and I kind of go from there. Oh, I should also say that, I guess for the previous one, I would really hope to get that out within a week or two. I'll see how my schedule goes. Within a week or two is when I would prefer to release it. And yeah. Okay, so now we get to the end bit. It's time to say goodbye to this following person who left a comment. That's right. So, once again, everyone, thank you very much for watching Shonen Archive. I'll see you guys in the next one. And now, say goodbye, Mahajical745. You're not going to hear this end bit here where I just kept like messing up, but if you did hear this, thank you. Bye bye.